let's give a big round of applause for Mr. Mark Davis.
I had an opportunity to talk with a lot of you when you came in, and I was asking the same question: what brought you here? Why are you interested in virtual reality? And I can tell by some of the answers I got that we've got all kinds of interests in the room. A little bit about me. I'm not an expert in virtual reality, but I am highly passionate about virtual reality. I followed it all the way from the 1990s when I was a lot younger, and I was like, oh my God, this is Star Trek, I'm all about it, right? And also I want to point out something. I just noticed when I came in here, I've only been in here twice, but I've had the pleasure of meeting Tom and working with him on ClutchCon and meeting with David and Julian, and it's really phenomenal with people here. But if you look, when you come right in the room, right by the door, it's the bridge of the Enterprise, right there. And somehow it's kind of appropriate, because when I talk about virtual reality, most people think of the holodeck, right? How many people here think of the holodeck? Except for you, young lady. I'm pointing you out right now. She's not a Star Trek fan. I told her to move earlier, because this is the Star Trek section. Star Wars over there. Just saying. And I don't know what J.J. Abrams is going to do. I'm just saying, but get ready for the lens flare. So, just ready. And crazy little things like Spock, and never mind. Anyway, but the holodeck is actually a great example of what the vision of virtual reality is. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk a little bit about how it works, and then I'm going to talk about where it's at, what's happened, because it's happening really fast. Now, let me get a show of hands. How many people knew about it in the 90s? Don't raise your hand. I know you're not old enough. Okay. So did you follow it? It was really kind of the thing. You saw movies, all kinds of stuff come up about this. This was like the next big thing. Unfortunately, the tech wasn't there. It just wasn't there. None of us really thought that was the case. We were living in the, it's the 90s. We're, got our great little computers. I got my Commodore Amiga. Off we go. We're going to do virtual reality. Nowhere near the power. Nowhere near. So we'll go into that more. How many people have an Oculus Rift? Oh my goodness, there are people. Excellent. How many people are going to my meetup? All right, that's good. Keep raising your hand. You can lie. This one's good. You should be going. We've been going for about 1.5 years. And just a quick story about that. I started it because I couldn't get a hold of an Oculus Rift. I thought to myself, So I was on the Reddit. There's a great Oculus subreddit. And I hung out there. I ordered one, but it was back ordered for months, so you couldn't get one. And so I said, well, I know, why don't I make a meetup? And then if I make a meetup, somebody will show up with an Oculus Rift. Well, I made the meetup. Not much happened. Had a lot of people sign up. I'd send email out, and nobody would reply. I wrote to the meetup people saying, is this actually working? Because it's like, I feel like it's radio. Nobody's writing me back. Finally, one guy by the name of Jamie Hurt wrote me back, and he said, yeah, I got one. And I said, oh, please let me see it, because I've been dying at this point. Because at this point, I had found YouTube. There's a guy by the name of Cymatic Bruce, that's his handle, his real name is Bruce Wooten, who worked at the Computer Museum out in Silicon Valley, and he was doing videos showing Oculus Rifts and all the different experiences that were out there. Well, so one night, I don't think my wife's here now, so one night, this is like, keep it on the down low, okay? Don't want to see it show up anywhere. One night, I'm holding the iPad, literally, I'm going to put this here, like this up here. Now, I don't see well anyway. I'll go into that a little bit more, but I don't see well. But even she thought that was too close. And she said, well, what are you doing? I said, well, it turns out, because of the way stereoscopic 3D works, that if you hold the iPad close enough with a YouTube video showing Oculus video playing, that you could see it in 3D. It was crazy. And I was like, oh, look at this. And then I got better at it. And I could hold it out a little bit further, and the picture became clearer. And I'm like, oh my God, this is cool. And so I got her doing it. I don't think she'd confessed to it in this room. But anyway, she was doing it. So that's how passionate I was. I was just watching everything I could find about it. All right, let me go ahead. See if this works. So what is virtual reality? Okay. If you watch some movies in the 90s, like, for example, what's that one? Disclosure. What's another one? Lawnmower Man. Yeah, we don't talk about that one. Disclosure is actually a good choice, because Disclosure It was a story about sexual harassment. I'm not sure I bought into that premise with Michael. Well, never mind, that's the whole thing. But anyway, they had a whole section, they built it around virtual reality. So there's this notion, what I'm going to talk to you about, immersion versus presence, okay? And if you want a really good talk about this, you should look on YouTube, look up a guy by the name of Michael Abrish, who is now the chief scientist at Oculus. He does a really good discussion about this, but I'm going to give you the layman's view of this. Immersion is the idea that you have things that are coming into your eyes, coming into your ears, that try to tell you that you're there, okay? Maybe not even that. Maybe a better example might be something like this. You have an image, you're looking at that image, okay? Now, if you look at that image and pretend there's nothing else going on in the room, you can do that now if you like. Maybe, just maybe, you might think that's you sitting on the edge of the building, right? Anybody feel scared? Not yet, right? Okay. One thing I might point out to you is that because of the medium of television and movies and such, we've become very desensitized to media. And so the things, and my wife is a Chinese American, she came over 15 years ago, and she watches some of the shows like Game of Thrones, she can't watch it. It's just too intense, right? So I admit to you that many of us are desensitized, so that might not be enough to get your attention. Well, what if I add one more thing? Okay, so maybe not, but that's traffic noise, right? But I gave you two inputs. I gave you a visual input and I gave you an audio input. Neither one of them took you there, but I would say that it's immersive, particularly if you got up really close to it and that's all you saw. Presence is when you think you're there and you lose touch with the reality around you. And that's the goal of virtual reality. That's what we're trying to achieve. Take you away from where you are and put you somewhere else. It's a really big concept, and I can tell you it's incredibly difficult. And even today, with the stuff we have, it's not good enough yet to completely pull it off. I have moments of presence in the stuff I have at home. So, I brought with me, and I put it over here, this, I'll talk about it later more, but this is the Samsung Gear VR. This just got released in December. It's really a big deal. I'm going to pass it around. I'm going to look to make sure I get it back. But it really works quite simply. You open this, you slide the phone in, which I laid somewhere. Right here. So you take your cell phone. This is a Galaxy Note 4. And it's interesting because at first I wasn't really interested because I had seen Google Cardboard. Okay, so there are those people who really think Google Cardboard is cool. I'm not sure I'm with them. Part of why I'm not with them is because if you've never seen VR before, you might think that's VR, and if you do, you're wrong. Because it has nothing really to do with VR. I think of it as like a high-tech ViewMaster. That's what it really is, okay? When I found out, and there's another YouTube video I'd recommend, a video from John Carmack, who is a name I'll talk about later. He's a very important person. John Carmack did a talk at Oculus Connect, which was a developer conference last September, and in that conference he talked about the work he did with Samsung to actually make it possible to do VR on this phone. They actually modified the kernel of the phone. Who here knows what kernel is? Don't say Kentucky Fried Chicken, that would be wrong. Kernel is like the low-level part of the operating system. They modified the kernel and went around Android so they could get the performance that you need for VR. This operates when it does VR at 60 frames per second, and later I'll tell you why that's important. So the way it works is you slide it in, put it in like that, and then snap it into place and put the cover back on, and that's it. It's a really big deal because first off, it's mobile. There's no cords, there's nothing. You're not tethered, and you have the phone and sensors that are inside this device that help the phone know where it is. I'll talk more about that. What I'll do is pass the thing around without the phone so that I know for sure I'll get it back, and ask you to be careful. Anyway, that's available right now for $200 if you have a Note 4 and it only works with a Note 4. If I might wrote it. All right, so head-mounted display. That's what that is. There are actually been 3 generations of the head-mounted display since 2012. The first one on the far left is the Oculus Rift DK1, the first development kit. The one above is the Oculus Rift DK2, which is the current generation that's available to the public. And then the third one is the one they just showed at CES, which is called Crescent Bay. They actually showed it in September of last year as well. And Crescent Bay is basically the third generation PC HMD, okay? Now each one of them take tremendous steps forward, tremendous steps forward. I'll get into what the differences are later, but let's look at what you can do with the DK2. I've got a short video. Now, I have to tell you, the people that are into virtual reality, we get excited about what might not seem that exciting. So at one point in this video, you may go, well, come on, Mark, but if you are into VR, you'll get this.
Recently, Benoit Deroux created an absolutely fantastic photoreal or near photoreal reconstruction of a Paris apartment using Unreal Engine. And today, I'm getting the fantastic opportunity of checking it out using an Oculus Rift DK2. Now, I've set my Oculus Rift DK2 camera up in the corner of the IR tracking camera, which will allow me to stand up and experience it as if I was actually in this apartment. And I'm using an Xbox 360 controller to move around. And I have to say, it looks absolutely stunning. There are some glitches with the Oculus Rift DK2 version of this in that some of the textures are only shown in one eye, the little details on the wall there. But other than that, this looks absolutely amazing. I feel like I'm completely placed in another world. The floor in this is wood, but I'm stood in real life on a carpet, and that's really confusing my mind. Why am I feeling carpet when I'm on wood? It doesn't make any sense. The 3D models in this scene as well look incredible. Look at the detail on this radiator. I'm not sure how this is running at 75 FPS. I'm running on a Core i5-2500K and a GTX 970, and this is running absolutely flawlessly with no stutter, no issues at all, and I'm recording. And yet we've got these models, a radiator. I'm getting excited by a radiator. That's what it's come to, radiator excitement. This should saying how good virtual reality is because radiators are exciting. But look at the detail on the radiator. You can see all little bumps and the way it's bracketed to the wall. And then the wall itself, its subtle textures and little bumps and divots in the way that the wall's being.
So you probably were able to figure it out. The guy on the left, he was wearing the headset, and as he looked around, what you were seeing was what he saw. But what he really saw inside the headset was two video sources, a source that goes into one right eye and one that goes in the left eye. And your brain puts it together and creates a 3D image. So what you saw wasn't actually as phenomenal as actually experiencing this. And what you also saw was Unreal Engine 4 doing that whole piece. So it's really amazing. And yes, people get excited walking into rooms that seem realistic, especially if they're computer-generated graphics. Shows you how far we've come from the 90s and the Commodore Amiga. The next thing I want to talk about is the Samsung Gear VR. So it's going around the room. I haven't checked to see if it went out the door yet, but I'm assuming it hasn't. I love you people, I trust you. The Gear VR is just a headset. You put the phone in it. That's actually not the right phone. That's the Note 4 Edge, but I couldn't find a good image of the Note 4, so ignore that little curved screen because it really won't work with that one. But the big deal about this is it's mobile. The PC, you saw the guy walking around with the DK2, he had the cable, and so the PC experience is tethered, which means you really can't walk around too much because you're going to pull the cord and destroy your PC. This one you could walk around, though I wouldn't recommend that either for other safety reasons. The other thing I want to show you is this next piece. And by the way, I do not work for Samsung. I'm kind of like a converted Apple guy. I'm not really converted. I still love Apple. I think there's an Apple employee here, so I want to make sure I say the right things. But Samsung on national television ran one spot in the playoffs for VR. We have not seen a VR television spot since the 90s when they did the Virtual Boy, which pretty much killed it all, right? That pretty much killed it if you remember that. It was terrible. Well, this is not great, okay? This is not great, but this is a piece they just released for the web.
Samsung has made the exciting world of virtual reality a reality with Gear VR Innovator Edition. Powered by Oculus and the Galaxy Note 4, Gear VR is a virtual reality headset that lets you experience games, movies, and more like never before. You simply insert the Galaxy Note 4 into place and put it on. Then select Milk VR and get ready to be amazed. You're gonna want some serious sound.
Whoa, what a view.
Gear VR plunges you into a totally immersive 360 environment. What do you think?
Feels like I'm really there.
You can see things from a whole new perspective. Ready for another adventure? Navigate menus, explore worlds, and play games by simply turning your head, swiping, and tapping the side-mounted touchpad.
And now I'm on a safari.
Gear VR brings the experience to life. And where are you? I'm in a really intense battle. Take that! Whoa. Looks like the best seat in the house. Up, down, side to side, even behind you. Everywhere you look, you're in the action. Wow. And it all happens on the Super AMOLED screen on the Galaxy Note 4. The world of virtual reality is finally here, with Samsung Gear VR Innovator Edition, powered by Oculus and the Galaxy Note 4.
For me, it kind of, even though some of the acting and, it's a little over the top, it kind of gets me going a little bit right there, because we're talking about VR on television. We're talking about this stuff, and it's real. Everything you saw in the commercial, with the exception of that one piece where it's kind of like in the game kind of thing, all of those experiences are on my Gear VR, and they look just like what you saw, except you're there. You're flying over New York City, because of what they're using is 360 video. So that's a whole thing, and I'll talk a little bit about content later, but it's really cool. And this is being done on a mobile phone. So how does it work? All right. Believe it or not, the basic idea goes all the way back to the 1800s. It's crazy, right? Maybe upstairs in your attic, maybe in your parents' attic, maybe in your grandparents' attic, you might find a stereoscope. Back in the day, and I can't say I was there, they had these things, and you can get them on eBay. I saw them, and I almost bought one. I'm very tempted, where people would draw images on a card. There'd be an image for the left eye, an image with the right eye, and they'd put it in a device like this, and you would see one image that was 3D. So the concept is the same, where you have content for each eye, and your brain is supposed to put it together. Now, how many people bought a 3D television? Did you get excited about that? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Anyone? No. The reason you get excited about it is because I don't know what the demos you did, but I went, okay, that kind of looks like 3D. I don't know, I don't care. Right? Same thing with 3D movies. I think Avatar was the only thing I saw that even remotely impressed me with 3D movies. Right? Anybody here disagree with that? Somebody put their hand, they were playing with my headset. They didn't put their hand up. So, but 3D here is a whole different story. Because when you're in virtual reality, the object really does look like it's right here. It really looks 3D, and the only thing that messes it up is when you try to reach out and touch it, and you can't. In fact, that's one of the big issues. You can't feel there are no hands just with a headset. That won't get you hands. So that's how the vision piece works. There's a second piece you need. You need field of view. So back in the 90s, we were limited to about 35 degrees field of view, which is like this, right? This is ridiculous. It's like binoculars, and so you'd see the screen in the distance. So field of view, they think you need around 110, 120 would be great if we could do it. Better, more is better, but you reach a point of diminishing return. But at least 110 degrees of view. So that's what it's showing. So the DK1 at 110 degrees of view. So that's enough so that some of your peripheral vision begins to see. Now, interestingly enough, on the DK2, it kind of went down a little bit because of the screen they ended up using and the lenses. So this is something that Oculus has promised for the consumer release, that it would be at least at 110. This is a very important component. The next one is the sensors. So the headset itself has a sensor that keeps track of head position. So knowing what the roll is, the pitch, and the yaw. So it tracks this. But the problem with the DK1 was that it didn't know if you did this. So if you tried to lean around a corner or something like that in Half-Life, which by the way, I play Half-Life in VR. I don't know about you, but it's super cool. If you try to look around the corner, you can't because there's no sensor for that. And in fact, if you do that, that's the greatest way to get sick, because that's one of the problems. So if there's a motion that you make that the computer doesn't pick up, there's a chance, depending on your personality and how you're made, that you may feel motion sickness. If you have motion sickness now, you're doing easy things. You ride in a car and you get motion sick, just doing it in VR may not be your thing, okay? Because right now it's, depending on your tolerance, can determine how long you can stay in it. Thankfully for me, it's not been a problem. Not been a problem for me, but a lot of people do have a problem with it. But if I do things where like say I take an experience like a roller coaster, or I'm being dropped off of a building, well, yeah, that's going to make me feel kind of bad because, well, actually, that's what you're supposed to feel. If in real life, you'd feel kind of bad if you fell off of a building or did a roller coaster, right? So that part's working. That's presence, right? So now we get to the DK3, or what we're calling Crescent Bay. Actually, it shouldn't be called DK anything because Oculus is not releasing this one. They showed this one at CES this year and at Oculus Connect in September of last year. Notice a couple things about it. I use this image because the third component you need is positional tracking. Okay, so to take that care of this case where you want to lean around the corner. So in the case of the DK2, there's a camera that you put on top of your PC or on a tripod some distance away that keeps track of all those little IR pieces. So those IR lights, I suppose that's what you would call them. It tracks them so it knows where you are in 3D space. So now you've got head tracking, positional tracking, stereoscopic. And on the Crescent Bay, they added 3D positional audio because, in fact, the Oculus licensed some technology from a university so that it's possible to actually accurately put a sound in a 3D space around you because sound is one of the other pieces you need. So let's talk about motion sickness a minute. Excuse me. So, without going too far into the story of Oculus, which is a really cool story in of itself, I will tell you that the company, in particular Palmer Luckey, who is the guy that founded Oculus, with the Kickstarter, made friends with John Carmack, who was paying attention to what he was posting on a website. John Carmack is kind of the guy that kind of got this moved into the credible realm, and a lot of people learned about what this kid was doing. He was 19 at the time. And what he said is, I'm going to take mobile parts, the screens and the sensors, and I'm going to make a headset, and I'm going to sell it. I'm going to put it up on Kickstarter for $250,000. I need to raise $250,000. He raised $2.4 million. Meanwhile, what he didn't know is that Valve was working on virtual reality. And at Valve Software, they run Steam. They've got a Half-Life, a ton of games. They've been working on this for quite a while. And one of the things that came to them was, at what speed do we have to get video to your brain to alleviate nausea, sickness? And different people have different things, but they believe that you need to get 120 frames per second. So that means you have to be moving at 120 frames per second to get to a point where you feel really comfortable, where it's unlikely you're going to get sick. There was another component they decided you needed. You needed a screen that wasn't persistent. LCD displays are persistent, meaning that an image will appear on the screen and then it will stay on the screen until the next image appears. Well, that's a problem because if you turn your head, what you don't want is a big blur. And that's what was happening on the DK1. You turn your head, it blurred because it could not send the frames fast enough and it held the previous frame on the screen. So that's what this is showing. Basically, the frames need to come while you move. The solution to that problem turns out to be OLED, an OLED display technology, because it doesn't work that way. When you turn off the screen, when it doesn't have a frame, the screen goes off. That means there's no persistence. The switching is nearly instant. So it's possible then to feed the frames at a fast enough rate so that you perceive fluid motion when you turn your head. A very key ingredient to having no motion sickness in VR. So the DK2 has this screen and it runs at 75 frames per second. The next issue is resolution, okay? The Note 4 has got a quad HD screen. It's 1440p, okay, which is really high res. If you look at my phone, I don't know where I put it, but if you look at the phone, you'll look, I put it over here? Yeah. If you look at this screen, it's phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. Very high resolution. In fact, so high resolution that I don't know that they need to go any further. This is what's being used in the Gear VR, right? Well, the problem with it is that, unfortunately, because of the optics, you can still see the pixels. Where if you look at this, you probably can't see the pixels. So from the mobile space, we're already exceeding what you need for quality VR. The requirements for quality VR is higher than what we're doing on mobile phones and are likely to do on mobile phones for a long time. So a relationship was, a couple things happened that were also phenomenal. Oculus sold the company to Facebook. You'll notice there's no like button on the DK2, so that's the good news. The really great news is that with that amount of money going into it and Samsung's desire to try to push themselves outside and play in VR, they were able to make a relationship between Oculus, Facebook, and Samsung for displays in exchange for technology. So the IP, the software, the whole piece was licensed to Samsung so they can make Gear VR. This is an awesome and phenomenal thing, and I'm not sure it would have happened if Apple had acquired it or Microsoft. So what can you experience in VR? Well, a lot of things, all right? You look carefully at these pictures. Obviously, yes, you can be Star Wars, you can fly over there. I don't have any good Star Trek things. However, the Bridge of the Enterprise has been done, the engine room of Enterprise. You can do simulations. There's also social experiments that are going on that people are doing where you could do some transgender things. What's it like to be a woman? You can find out. You put on the headset, the other person puts the headset, obviously of the opposite sex, and then you look at yourself and you see that you no longer have the parts you're familiar with. That's how it works. But this is a fascinating study and you can read about it on the net. I just thought I'd share. Lots of things are going on. Because of my background being in the financial industry at Market, I wanted to show you what's going on the kind of serious side. Bloomberg has a virtual war room or trading room where you're sitting in this space and you're looking at all these screens. Now, if you're a trader, that might not be enough screens, but it's up there, right? The next piece is from Fidelity. Fidelity's doing this internal project about how would you look at a stock portfolio in virtual reality.
Imagine being able to walk the streets of your stock portfolio, to view the stocks that represent your financial well-being as a living, breathing ecosystem. What if you could create a financial city that could someday give investors a better way to interact and engage with their money? Could this empower your financial life? Our Stock City is a unique 3D environment that allows you to process financial information easily without ever seeing a single number or percentage. Each building is a stock, and the height of the building represents the price. The footprint of the building is based on the 90-day trading volume and shares outstanding. When the market's open, it's daytime, and when the market's closed, it's night. Sunshine and rain tell you whether the market is up or down. Well, now there's no need to imagine, because it's real. What you're seeing here is just our first prototype, someone's lists of stocks to watch. It's an experiment, with everyday patterns and shapes and 3D technology, but think about what the future could hold. Traffic in the streets could represent trading activity, or birds flocking on buildings may indicate social media chatter. What if you could plan for retirement by building a city that represents your portfolio? You could see which investments were keeping you on track to meet your investment goals and which were bringing your city down. Maybe you could even forecast the future by how much your city was thriving. We continue to explore future applications for this technology, starting with virtual reality through an Oculus Rift headset or on your own web browser. But we want to hear your ideas. Visit fidelitylabs.com and tell us what you think. Try our new Stock City and help us build the portfolio of the future.
So while the stock city might not be the coolest thing you've ever seen, in my world, in the financial world where we do mobile apps, we look at this kind of stuff and go, well, maybe that's not how we envision looking at financial data. But the idea that people are already playing with this is phenomenal. And it's happening quickly. I'd love to tell you some of the stories I'm already starting to have internally at Market about VR and how important they think it's going to be. This is my prediction. I think it will be mainstream in 2020. Now, that doesn't mean all of you will have VR headsets. I asked Tom if he would be handing them out tonight, and he said no, just drones. 2020, though, I think you're going to find it at least in your friends' homes. You're going to find it in a variety of forms, whether it be mobile or it might be the PC version. I don't know, but I think it's happening really quickly. The Kickstarter happened in 2012 for the Oculus Rift. Here it is now, 2015, just the very beginning of 2015. We've gone through 3 iterations of the PC product and our first generation of mobile. I give you a statistic that's interesting. In 2007, there were 65 million smartphones in the world. 65 million. At the introduction of the iPhone in 2007 to now, there are 1 billion smartphones. And it's not been that long, guys. Not that long at all. 1 billion smartphones, right? It's phenomenal. So this is my prediction. 2020, some people think it's going to happen sooner. I'm conservative, but I think that's going to happen. And I think it's going to happen because of the content. If you play with Gear VR in particular, what's really interesting about it is that there's actually, because of the way it works, there's a built-in store. There's a built-in place to immediately immerse yourself into the content itself. I've got at least 30 different demos. Oculus is likely to announce at GDC the availability of their store that allows apps to be sold through it. When that comes out, then there'll be real content that you can spend a lot of time in. But the kinds of things that I'm able to do already with Gear VR, they talked about in the ad earlier, something called Milk VR. Well, what it is just a simple place where you go to and you download video. And the video is 360 degrees. It's all around you and in 3D in some cases. So that could be really cool if you think about watching or being in a kind of like a movie experience with the world around you. You know, you're there in the story. So at Sundance, just 2 weeks ago, there was a whole section set aside for VR. Now, Oculus announced a new division called Oculus Story, and their focus is to be the Pixar of VR. So they intend, and they showed one of the pieces they made called Lost. They intend to have 5 shorts out before the end of the year. I'm telling you it's a big thing, and I'm telling you also porn is already happening, in case you were wondering. So seeing is believing. So earlier, I was talking a little bit about my eyesight. Somebody asked me, why are you so passionate about VR? Well, the answer for me, and maybe different people have different answers to this, but the answer for me is that when I was a kid, first off, I had a couple things. I was young enough to see us land on the moon. Okay, so I can confirm it happened. It did happen. The second thing I can tell you is that after that, I became a big Star Trek fan. And so I wanted to be Captain Kirk. Failing that, I couldn't do that. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. Can't do that either. Turns out my eyesight is correctable to where I can drive a car. I'm thankful for that, but that's as good as it can be. Most people, I'll say most because there's a lot that don't, but a lot of people have the opportunity to say, if I want to be a fighter pilot, well, I can just go do that. Not all of us can, and I can't. So a lot of things I get stopped on vision, whether I want to fly, whether I want to do, you name it. There's always the limitation that you have to have perfect vision. Well, it turns out with VR, I can fly. With VR, I can go places you can't believe. I have a game that's available for the DK2 now. It's released. It's called Elite Dangerous. And I fly a starship in Elite Dangerous. And I got to tell you, the name of my ship is Enterprise, and I fly it. And the other thing I'll tell you is when I'm sitting there, I look around, and I'm in a cockpit, and I see the space station up there, and I fly to it, and I see other ships flying around me. It's phenomenal. Phenomenal. So I talk about seeing is believing. I want to talk to you something about the social impact of this, well, just a touch. We don't really know with virtual reality what its impact is going to be on society. But we already know we have immersive worlds that people spend a lot of time in. How many people have heard of World of Warcraft? Okay? You know if you've played World of Warcraft or any of the other MMOs, You can be very absorbed in it, not so much fighting the monsters and getting loot, though that's very important. It's about the relationships you create in a virtual space. So if you want to understand why Facebook bought Oculus, it's really obvious. What they believe they want to do is be the VR social networking platform. That's what they're after. They already operate the largest social network in the world. What's the next step? It's VR. If you want to kind of get a vision of what this is about, I recommend 2 books, Snow Crash and Ready Player One. Both these books will give you this idea of the metaverse, this idea where we'll connect in and play with others or be with others in a virtual space. It sounds like Star Trek, it sounds way out there, but it's not. I'm in a beta test right now with a company out of Silicon Valley doing something called AltSpace VR. And what they do is they put you in this one virtual space. Up to 40 people can be there, and they just showed the Super Bowl to 40 people in a VR space where we could talk to one another. So I come back to the social impact question by showing you this one video.
Bar, 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 bar.
She's saying bar, 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 right? Yeah, she is. How about now, though?
Bar, 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 bar.
You're hearing far, 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 right? Well, actually, you're not. The audio hasn't changed. It's still bar, 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 bar. Don't believe me? Watch it again and then turn away halfway and you'll hear something completely different.
Bar, 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 bar.
Let's have a look at the effect again. This time I'm going to have a split screen with 2 Alexes. Now I want you to go between the 2, the audio is going to remain the same, and you will hear in your brain something completely different depending on which one you look at.
Bar, 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 bar.
So I showed this to you because when you think about it, we don't really realize how much our brain is taking as input. We think when we hear something, we're just listening, but we're not. We're taking all kinds of input. So if we start playing with those inputs, I don't know what the result is. So my last slide, how could you be further involved? So the Colorado Oculus Rift meetup, or we call ourselves CORE, meets the first Wednesday of the month. We've got 157 members and we're waiting for you to show up. We usually have DK2s and Gear VR, and I tell you what's going on every month. Thank you.
So let's give a big warm round of applause to Mr. Julian Lynch.
So let's say you wanted to get a little bit more involved with virtual reality. You know, maybe you want to develop content. We've run into folks locally that are, for instance, they're involved with symphonies and they want to get students to be able to play with an orchestra. So you actually record the orchestra in 3D and you swap out the violinist and you can pop in there and you can play music. We have people that are interested in doing science. We have people that want to do education, all this other stuff. So maybe you're one of those people. Or you want to invest in VR, or you just kind of want to know more. You want to go a little bit deeper. So there's a few things that you need to know. And Mark already hit on a couple of these. I'll go just a little bit more in depth. But there's this simulation sickness, this motion sickness that you can get with VR. There's some things that are specific to VR when you're designing content that go a bit beyond just regularly making games or movies. And I'll talk about that. And then just a couple of the other non-game things that folks are doing with VR, because there's really a lot of cool stuff going on. So with VR, a lot of the issues have already been solved, or at least they're being worked on. As Mark mentioned, there was an issue in the past where the technology just wasn't there, where you could see the individual pixels of the simulation you were looking at. And they call this the screen door effect, because it looks like you're looking through a screen door at the world. You see all these squares. It just kind of breaks the immersion. There's issues with field of view, and just issues with raw compute power for the machines. And we've solved a lot of these, or we're working on them, but one of the things we're still struggling with is this motion sickness or the simulation sickness. And the technical term is kinetosis. And I'm just going to throw a couple terms up there. Has to do with the vestibular system. And so what this is it's the inner ear. I'm sure as you guys know, or as you learned in school, the ears are what tell us which direction is down. They sort of help orient us in the world. They also tell us when our head is moving. So we have this whole system built in to tell us which way is which. And when you stick on a VR, you can mush up the signal to where what's coming into the eyes and what's coming into the rest of the body doesn't match. And the brain rejects that. It wants to throw it up. It makes you nauseous. So the issue that we have, and this is the same issue for people that get motion sickness in cars, is I don't feel like I'm moving, but I see that things are moving around me. And that's where those wires get crossed. That's what confuses the brain. And so there's a few things that we can do about that. One of the things that we're already doing, or I guess a couple of things that we're already doing, we're predicting the position of the human head. We know that people can only move so fast, right? Once your head gets moving, it's likely to stay moving. So what we can do is with these VR headsets, we take a look at what the head's doing, where it's accelerating. We try and figure out, okay, in 0.01 seconds, where is the head going to be? So we try and predict where you're going to be such that when the image flashes up, it matches where your head is. Otherwise, you get this lag to where I'm moving my head, but I'm still seeing something just a little bit behind, and that's what's going to make you sick. Other things, one that Mark talked about was high frame rate. So we want to put up a lot of images very quickly. Everyone here has grown up on movies and TV, and movies and TV runs at about 24 frames a second. That just does not work for VR. 120 is the optimal, that's where we want to get, but really you have to be around 75 to 90. That's kind of the target to where most people don't get sick anymore. And there's also this, there's a couple more technical things. One of them is continuous rendering. And so this has to do with the way that computers put images up on the screen. Typically, what your computer is doing when it puts images up, or what happens when a movie is going, is it's actually a collection of still images, right? A movie has a frame, and then it has another frame, and it has another frame, and it has another frame. And the way the computers work is they print out a frame, and then they print out another frame, and they print out another one. And there's a little bit of lag associated with that. And it's not something that you would ever notice otherwise. But we're getting into this area of technology where we have to think about these 0.1 millisecond differences in things. That's kind of the level we have to get to. So one of the things they're trying to do is basically they're having the computer constantly paint this canvas. And then they're letting the VR device say, hey, I need the next picture. So rather than pushing, they're letting it pull, basically. And that shaves off just that sub-millisecond and gets it so you feel less sick. And then there's things about persistence, which Mark also mentioned, and that's we want to change the color of a pixel. So if I'm looking over here, I'm looking at a white wall, and then I turn, and I might be looking at a blue sky or some other color. So we have to change the color of that pixel from white to blue. And we've actually, when they started doing this, they ran into the issue of these displays could not update fast enough. That you'd tell it, hey, put up a white pixel, and then you tell it, hey, put up a blue pixel, but the little diodes that are putting out these colors, the electronics couldn't move fast enough. So the next frame, instead of going from white to blue, would be kind of white to bluish, and then the next frame would be a little more blue, and the next frame it would finally hit as blue. So you saw all this ghosting and fuzziness, and again, your brain just didn't like it. It said, this is not real, it rejected it. So we have all these hardware and these technology fixes, but there's things we have to actually do in our software to be able to render things quickly, to be able to create a good experience. And some of those things are, first of all, we need to keep our scenes fairly simple, or we need to do tricks to reduce what they call in video games as draw calls, the number of things we're drawing on the screen. And this issue is compounded with VR because VR is actually two monitors. So if I'm looking out at this room, if I'm in a computer, I'm rendering a chair, and then I'm rendering a person, and then I'm rendering a light, and each of these is a draw call, so you get hundreds and hundreds of draw calls, and then you double it, because you have to do it for each eye. And doing this takes time, and that adds lag, and that makes you sick. So that's one thing you have to be aware of. Another thing is moving a person in VR is usually a no-no. You do not want to physically, without someone giving you input, to move them to another space. That is going to make people super, super sick, super, super quick, especially if you start turning them. Because if I'm standing still and my eyes are telling me that I'm moving, and I don't have any other input anywhere else. I don't have my hands that are pressing a button. I'm just standing still, and all of a sudden I'm looking to the right. That's going to make people sick. Your brain's going to reject that. Never ever put people upside down in VR. For those of you who have tried it, the first time I was trying a friend's demo, and he put me up in a helicopter, really simple model, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then I don't remember what I did. I hit like a power line or something. And all of a sudden, the next thing I know, the VR is flipped completely upside down, and I think I just threw that thing across the room as hard as I could. It did not compute. And then a couple other things that are kind of interesting. Darker is better in terms of simulation sickness and motion sickness. And they don't quite know why. They're trying to figure that out. But if you're the kind of person that gets motion sickness just let's say you go to a movie theater, or let's say that you're watching a movie at home. And you're watching a movie, and the movie is turning around and panning the camera, and you're one of those people that's super sensitive and you get sick. If you turn off the lights, if you turn down the TV, you get less sick. Why? I have no idea. One of those kind of weird things we're still trying to figure out. And then, wherever possible in VR, you try and only move people forward. I'm going to keep coming back to this because moving people around without their consent is a quick way to get them sick. So essentially, you let a person turn, and then you allow them to move forward. And then you let them turn again, and you allow them to move forward, rather than trying to rotate the character. So we have all these tricks that we can do. And again, our predictive tracking, higher frame rates, is continuous rendering, and then design decisions that we can make. A couple other things we got to know when we design for VR is they have to do kind of with the way people are put together. So first of all, not all of us have the same distance between our eyes. It's not something you would ever think about, but with VR, this thing's a little lower resolution, it's cutting off the image. I'll talk about that in just a second. With VR, we're taking input from a flat screen, we're moving it over a curved lens, and then we're bringing it into the eye, so it looks like we're kind of looking out into space. It tricks the eyes into thinking they're seeing the real world. But a lot of you already have this going on in your daily life. What does this look like? It looks like glasses. Yeah, I'm wearing glasses. A lot of you are wearing glasses. Glasses are curved. Glasses actually change your field of view. It's not something you ever think of, but the light that's coming into my eyes is actually coming in at one angle, hitting my glasses, and then being refracted to a different angle. So those black lines represent what my eye is seeing, and the red lines represent my actual field of view out into the world. So this is different for nearsighted and farsighted people. And it's actually something that takes your brain time to get used to. If you've been wearing glasses your entire life and you start to wear contacts, it feels weird, like things seem like they're a little farther away or a little nearer, again, depending on whether you're near or farsighted. And that's a problem that we have in VR, is if you have glasses, you take them off, you put VR on, then all of a sudden, things don't feel quite right. They feel a little bit disconnected. The scale isn't quite right, like something just isn't quite right, and your brain takes a while to get used to it. Another issue that was actually touched on in the video Mark showed, walking around the apartment, the British apartment, and most of you probably didn't catch this because you didn't have the ears out for it, but when you're creating games, a lot of times you'll sort of limit things by distance. So for instance, it takes a lot of compute power to create shadows in your game. So you'll sort of fade out shadows, that after a certain distance, you just don't have any shadows anymore. because why am I calculating shadows for a tree that's, you know, a quarter mile away from me? I can't even see it. And so the issue that you run into in VR is when things get very close to your eyes, the distance between one eye in an object and the other eye in an object is slightly different. It might be 20% further. So you might have one eye that's rendering darker shadows on an object than another eye. And they did experiments back in the 80s or 90s with folks to where they would take them, stick them in a machine, and they would display in one eye, say, blue, and in the other eye, they would display red. And some of you are nodding your heads. This was a kind of a famous study. And when they put these people in, they would see a bluish red color. They would not see purple. They would see blue-red. It was this new color because in one eye they were getting one image, in the other they were getting another, and their brain was trying to put it together. So you can get this same kind of thing to where objects look slightly different in one eye versus the other. The last issue that we have is with getting input, and that's one that we're still trying to solve. How do we let people interact with this world? So I think Mark and I were last night chatting with a guy online, Reverend Kyle is his name, and he said, you know, I was talking with, I was at an Oculus conference, we were going to a talk, they were talking about input, and somebody asked, so, like, what's your end game? What's your plan? What are you guys gonna do to be able to get input? And everybody up on the panel, all of these big wigs from Oculus, all these really smart guys, they kind of turn and look at each other and, you know, I don't know. Haven't figured that one out yet. We still don't know. And I'll get back to that in just a moment. That's one we're still trying to figure out. Actually, let's take a quick stab at that right now. So in terms of input, how do you get people to interact with these devices, these worlds? There's, I would say, about 4 main methods for doing it. One is that you do it within the device itself. So these devices already have some inputs, right? They can tell where you're looking. So people will do buttons to where if I look at something for long enough, it'll start a little timer, and then it'll click the button. Some of these VR devices are trying to do eye tracking, so actually tell where your pupils are looking and use that to interact with the world. Another way is with just traditional controllers, like you stick an Xbox controller in someone's hand and you allow them to move around a world that way. Works well enough, not super immersive, right? It doesn't get you that same perception of immersion. A third way, people are trying to do things with magnetic fields. And so what they'll do is they'll actually stick little devices on your fingers. I thought well, the slide unfortunately is cut off on here. But essentially they'll stick little things that create a magnetic field, and they'll have a device on your computer, and that device will try and understand where in 3D space your hand is, or maybe you're holding a controller. And then the fourth method is to try and use cameras. So maybe infrared cameras or real vision cameras that are looking at you and trying to figure out where your hands are, where your head is, where your body is. All of these things are still in their infancy. So keep an eye out, because I don't know which of these is going to be the winner. I don't know which is going to provide the most consistent experience, which is going to have the most accuracy, which is just going to feel best. We just kind of have to wait and see. So we're using VR for games and entertainment, right? I mean, those are the obvious ones. We already know how to do those things. Hollywood is a $10 to $15 billion a year industry. Games are a $50 to $70 billion a year industry. So we're making lots of money. We'll slap these things in VR, people will love them. Sure, it makes sense. But there's a lot of other things that we can do with VR too. So these are a few of the things that I've either been involved with or I know people that have been involved with, and just kind of want to give you a brief scan of what's going on. So military has actually been in VR for many years, longer than we've had commercial VR. They've done virtual reality a lot of the time with caves. And a cave is basically, how many of you remember when caves were the big thing back in the, I don't even know, 80s, 90s, aughts? They're a perennial thing that keeps coming back. But essentially giant video walls that you stick people in. So you guys saw the Omni treadmill earlier from CES. This is the Army's version. It just blows the Omni out of the water. This is an omnidirectional treadmill. You can walk in any direction, you can run in any direction, and it will keep you in place. So they've been doing this for quite a long time, and they stick suits on these soldiers that give them an electric shock whenever they are hit by a bullet. True story. We were chatting with a guy. He said they had, I believe it was a major stop by and just, kind of asked to see what was going on. They were telling him, oh yeah, we got these suits. And he said, you guys are wimps. I've been in war. I know what it's like. Put me in one of these things. See how we do. So they put them in one of these things, and they virtually shot the guy. And he collapsed and convulsed on the ground, got up, said no words, and just left. His manhood was destroyed in that moment. So they've been using this for a bit more intense virtual reality immersion than you and I are used to. And there's two things that they've been doing with it. One is for training. And with training, they're actually focused specifically on sort of machines, for instance, tanks, planes. If you stick someone out in the tank in the desert and you ask them to train, it costs about $10,000 a mile to train someone in a tank. That is a phenomenal cost. And then you have to drive the people or fly them to whatever base. And then when they're done, they go to a different base on the other side of the country. So just so much money is wasted just trucking people around, sticking them in the desert, putting them in these machines. Why not just use VR? If I can save, $50,000 per person, that's worth it. And then another thing is for specifically combat training. And a lot of what I've heard is it's actually sniper tactics training. So people are trying to understand how to counter enemy snipers. And just to give you guys kind of the quick rundown, snipers work with a spotter, and snipers have an escape route. They have someone that watches their escape route, and if their escape route gets cut off, they don't take the shot. This is the issue that we had in Iraq. So a lot of what our soldiers are trained to do is they're trained to cut off all the escape routes when a convoy is coming through. And that then cuts the sniper off. They will not take the shots, the convoy goes through safe. So you want to stick them in markets where there's people running around, there's little kids, there's all kinds of distractions. You really want them to be there to understand, what they're up against. And that's why they're just so into VR. So this is a project that I helped a guy named John Bruchode. He is an architect. That was his training. And it was essentially to sell these sort of high-end apartments, condos, whatever they are, and to let people come into the space and actually feel around how it feels and see how it looks. And VR is one of those things that is just so much more compelling than looking at something on a screen. They've been doing renderings of apartments forever, but once you get in VR, the first thing people notice is, wow, that ceiling is really high. Like there's no way to convey that with a 2D image. There's no way to feel what that room feels like. And so sticking people in these places it's been a lot of fun, and it's actually it's starting to evolve into sort of new subfields. So one thing that we've been doing is creating virtual offices for companies, big companies you've heard of, the Googles and Facebooks and Microsofts of the world. And recently we did one for a company I unfortunately can't name, but their second in command came into the virtual space, wandered around this new office that they're going to build. It's massive, and immediately started saying, she was wandering around her office and immediately started saying, oh, this is not going to work. I need a skylight put in right here. This wall needs to be moved back. The people that were building the construction firm that was building this in tandem was a little bit angry at us because they had already built the office. But this idea of being able to preempt this, to actually get into a space and feel what it's going to be like, and make some changes before you get in there. Decide what color of paint you want in your apartment, or we're a Silicon Valley startup and we want to try and build an office that has no walls. What does that feel like? I can't even imagine that, but you could actually build that in a virtual space, a giant warehouse, no walls, everybody's got desks that are clustered together, and just see if it works. Save yourself the $100 million of building it to try it out. Marketing with VR is huge. So a couple of projects that I've worked on. This top one was a driving experience. And over on the right, it's a little bit cut off, but that's actually me sitting with Eric here in an office, and that is a Logitech. So this is essentially a game controller that is a steering wheel, a shifter, and pedals. So you have all the parts of a car, and what you're seeing is driving in and it's been long enough, you're driving in a Suzuki through the Himalayas. So this was for a car company to just let people play with their cars and just say, oh, this is an awesome experience. The bottom one is for the Kings Stadium, so the Sacramento Kings, building a new stadium. So, again, the architect that I work with takes the plans, builds the virtual thing, and then we got some voice talent from DeMarcus Cousins. He comes out and greets you, and you can go around and just, what does this game look like from the box seats, What does it feel like outside? So just to give that marketing edge, there's been a huge amount of interest. There's a lot of money there. And then medical, education, training, a lot of other industries that I just don't have time and I don't want to make you sit here for are using this. Medical is starting to use VR, but they really prefer augmented reality. The thing about VR is that it is very immersive. It pulls you away. And in medical, they want to do the opposite. They want to sit you in an office with medical devices, but have a virtual patient. So how do we blend that virtual reality with the real world, where I can pick up a real scalpel and cut into a virtual patient? That's the kind of thing they're working on. Education is typically, the uses that I've seen, and this may be starting to change, is mostly for field trips. You stick on a VR device and you go somewhere you could never go. Take your kids to space, take them underwater, take them to a museum on the other side of the country. And this is something that really excites teachers, and this is something that just makes sense to kids. I mean, you can look at a model of a heart in a book or in a video until your eyes fall out. And over time, you'll start to memorize and understand, okay, there's the left ventricle and the right ventricle, and the blood goes in here and out here. But once you've actually held it in your hand and kind of turned it around, you get it. You get it in a way that you just can't from a book. So there's a huge potential there for learning. And then with training, corporate training and the like, mostly it seems to be a wow factor, that companies are using it almost as an afterthought, just so that people are excited about their training. Because I know all those of you in corporate just love training. It's so exciting. So that one is one we're still figuring out. How is it going to fit into training? So that is all I've got for you. Tom, would you like me to pitch the course for a moment?
Well, why don't you just talk a little bit about what's going to happen in the game course?
Sure. So all of this stuff, all of these projects, I'll just go back here, are built on top of a game engine. And the engine that I use is called Unity. And been doing this for about, 5 or 6 years now. Before that, I worked for a robotics company. Before that, I was an engineer. I don't know what happened. I was going to be all serious and be an engineer, and now I'm making games. Turns out there's a lot of cool things that you can do. So before you can do VR, you have to understand how to actually render in 3D, and you have to understand how to be a programmer. And so that's what we're trying to do with the course, is teach people programming. Teach them C# and Java, for instance, which together account for half of all programming jobs. I mean, it really is staggering just how widely used these languages are. So, hey, if you're going to want to learn programming anyway, why not do something fun? Why not make a virtual experience while you're learning? And then, while you're in there, we'll teach you about 3D rendering. We'll teach you about, working with models and audio and textures and all these other cool things. For me, it's about a lot more than games. I mean, I do make games, but a lot of what I make is science. It's data visualizations. It's trying to get science into the hands of kids or get it into the hands of meteorologists. It's architecture. It's all of these other things. It's the engine that I use, Unity, I feel is really becoming kind of like the next Flash. It's like a 3D Flash. You can do anything with it, right? Now they're starting to work on being able to build web pages with it. You can make science, you can make games. So that's why I'm so passionate, games themselves are a huge industry, $50 to $70 billion a year. They are the largest entertainment industry in the world. They're bigger than books, they're bigger than music, they're bigger than Hollywood. But that's only the beginning. There's so much more that we're only now starting to do with virtual worlds, with education, with all these other cool things. So that's the kind of stuff we're going to be exploring. very technical, 500 total hours of work, 110 in the classroom, the rest outside. Yeah, go from I've never, programmed or, I don't know much about video games to I have a job, I have a skill, I can actually do this for a career.
Yeah, can you talk about what they'll walk away with, the portfolio?
Sure. So I'm very project-based. I've been teaching at CU for a while, and I've done a little teaching sort of off and on before that. So when I work in these courses, the entire time that I'm working with the kids or the adults or whoever it may be, we're working on projects. If you're going to learn a new skill, you might as well immediately go and do something. Don't do homework. Go and make a game. Go and make a simulation. So I'm thinking 2 to 3 sort of major portfolio pieces over the course of this course, sort of increasing in complexity so that when you come out, you already have a portfolio. You're already ready to go to an employer and not only say, yes, I know how to do this thing, but here, let me show you. I built something with it.
All right, this is terrific. Let's give Julian a big round of applause.
So volume's already out. Flyer on the space station. Get near some of the objects in the room and interact with them. The visor, and so if you look up and don't move your hands up, then you're going to lose your hands.
Yeah, I'm going to like push forward and look up and then like.
And so in this space, I mean, so based on where you are physically standing, you can actually turn around and look behind you and rotate your body, rotate your feet, and wherever you're looking.
The first time I used the lead motion, I thought the software has actually not even caught up yet to what they needed to in order to. The hardware is capable of doing a lot of different gestures, but the software is not even close to being able to recognize it.
It didn't work at all. Because we were trying to figure it out for 30 minutes, and it was so not accurate. Then we.
I was in the tighter space, I got kind of motion sick. And then when I got outside, it was okay.
Interesting.
Because the wider field of vision.
Sure. Yeah, it feels like everybody's a little different. You can actually peek up if you want to. It's flip it up, looks like.
It says hit or
I know a guy I
turn.
went to school with who's actually trying to use this.
Mouse will actually turn your body if you want. So use your right hand on the mouse and the left hand on the arrow keys. Can you do that? Arrow keys?
It's okay, I got it.
Stuff to share.
Is that right?
For the purpose of building large scale industrial things.
How was the desktop?
Say, hey, what do you think about this piece?